Hey class, how's it going? What I'm going to talk about right now is I'm going to talk about the introduction to invertebrates, what we're being introduced to. So we're just going to look at some invertebrate characteristics and groupings of invertebrates, just so you know the groups and you can name a few things that are under there. This will be on a test we're probably going to be taking the end of next week. It's just a little short one again. Just being able to identify different invertebrate groups and the types that are in them. So here we go. So, invertebrate. Again, we remember that invertebrate simply means that it has no backbone. So the first one we're going to be introduced to, remember this was in that the mystery box where you reached your hand in and you're a little bit scared and hesitant to do it because I told you it was an animal. It was dead, but it was in there. We were introduced to the group of sponges. And remember, the example I said for that is a sea sponge. And yes, they are indeed alive. These are the ones that I'm talking about that have no tissues, have no organs or organ systems, but they do have the individual cells, and they're the ones with the tiny little flagellum that can whip around and suck water into the sides of the sea sponge and then spit it out the middle. Now, the other thing that we talked about, we talked just briefly on this, and hopefully once the projector comes in, we can see some videos and stuff on of these, is the cnidarians. And remember, I said that this C is actually silent, and you just pronounce it cnidarians. Now, an example of those would be jellyfish and corals. So just knowing one or two of those would be good for you. Jellyfish and corals. And these are the ones that have the stinging cells. If you ever touch a sea anemone or touch a jellyfish, you know that they have very powerful stings. They have things called cnidocytes. And these things can and will sting you if they feel threatened. And so that's what actually makes them just a little bit dangerous sometimes, especially when you're dealing with more aggressive and poisonous ones. Now, the other one we talked about when we spent a little bit of time on this was worms. And this is the one we got to do that lovely little dissection of one of these. Now, we have our common, the ones that we're used to, the segmented worms. The segmented, we also had the round, and then we had the flat. And remember, these are the two that I said can be pretty nasty parasites. This one, belonging with sometimes they'll fall closely related to the annelids, and this one's where you're going to deal with the leeches, and you guys are probably pretty familiar with what leeches can do. Now, with the roundworm, when we were cutting it open, you saw how simple the body structure is, how it had its sex organs along the side, and it just had that simple digestive tract just running right down the middle. These are very simple ones, but this is the first time you're going to get something that functions like a brain on animals, because the cnidarians and sponges don't really have a brain organ. They just use nervous tissue. Like nervous tissue in order to coordinate and make sure that they stay alive. Now, again, like I said, some of these can be really nasty parasites, but for the most part, most of these aren't. So don't think of all round and flatworms as really bad parasites. A majority of them actually don't do us any harm. They just mind their own business. Now, I briefly touched on this, but we're also going to be dealing with mollusks. And mollusks are actually very special little animals because they have a different grouping, and their grouping you can have either gastropods, you can have bivalves, and you can have cephalopoda or cephalopod. Whoops. Cephalopod. And this one's going to be your squids, octopuses, and nautilus. This one's going to be like your clams and your oysters. And this one's going to be like your snails and your slugs. Now, this one, obviously, what kind of gives it away is this one, the bi, because it's two. And if you remember, clams have the top end, and then they have the bottom end. Yeah, so there you go. And cephalopod and gastropod, and we'll work on these, especially when you're introduced to these new words. Sometimes they get a little bit hard. Now, the reason that these are all grouped together is because they have a very special thing called a mantle. And what the mantle does is it's this layer of tissue that allows them to make a shell. Now, it doesn't mean that all of them will do it, but the ones with shells, it's the mantle that's producing it. Now, we know with slugs they don't have it, but they have the ability to make that for protection. Now, after we talk with the mollusks, we're going to be doing that dissection tomorrow. In this dissection, we're going to be working on arthropods. and these are all of our nasty little creepy crawlies. With the arthropods, they have, what links them all together is they have this called an exoskeleton. They'll all have appendages, and what an appendage is, it's like an arm or a leg. Now, if you remember, not all these guys have appendages. You know, snail slugs, they're just kind of look like snakes almost, just like little fat, plumped up snakes. Clams, they don't have arms or legs. But once you get down here, you're going to see the different arms and legs. So, you know, here's my terrible picture of an ant. There's this awesome little antennae. So they have the appendages, and all these are going to be covered in an exoskeleton. And we have a skeleton inside of us. We don't have an exoskeleton, but pretty much what it is they have a soft inside and a very hard-shelled outside. And we'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of that tomorrow, and you can read about that a little bit in your book. Now, with these ones, you're going to be dealing with your arachnids, which are your spiders, your insects, with your bees, and what we're going to dissect tomorrow, crickets. We're also going to be dealing with crustaceans, which are your crabs. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is this one. And after this one, then we're going to be moving into to vertebrates. Is the echinoderms. And echinoderms are things that have an endoskeleton. And this means they have a skeleton on the inside. So remember, exo, exit, endo, opposite of exit. You can do that one as long as you know exit. You'll know endo, or you think in. So endoskeleton. And these are the ones you're going to be dealing with your sea stars, your brittle stars, your key cucumbers, your sea urchins, anything like that. And you can find all the lovely and wonderful pictures on page 152 and 153 in your book, and you can see those. So again, if you have any other questions, feel free to email me. I'm sure a lot of the information, you guys just got to make sure that you're actually reading your book. Don't just skim it, but actually read it. There's not really that much you know, reading that it asks you to do, but you will get a vast amount of information as long as you're making that little effort to do that. So, that's all we have to talk about with invertebrates. Again, just make sure you're taking good notes in class, and you'll have no problem whatsoever. So until next time, guys, I'll talk to you later. Bye.